All right, Rose, I'm going to ask you to come up and share your story with us.
Thank you.
This is Rose. This is the better half of Oliver, who was shared his story last month, and I'm sure you're all encouraged and blessed by what was shared there. So I've asked Rose to share her story, and I'll just give it over to you and take us to the start, a bit of your background and where you grew up.
Cool, okay. I hope this microphone's working okay. But I don't want to go too much into my family background just out of respect for my family, but I will say that there was addiction in my family without going into too much details. But my parents got divorced when I was around 10 or 11. And I was really close with my grandparents growing up. My grandpa, he was kind of like the rock of our family. So when anything would go wrong, he would always step in. I was very close with my grandparents. I still am very close with my grandma. But I didn't grow up with like a religious background or anything. My mum had kind of spiritual views, which did influence me, which I'll talk about later. But anyway, I did go to a Church of England primary school nevertheless, and I'm very grateful for that. I do believe God used it to plant seeds. Obviously, there are problems with the Church of England, but God can use a donkey to preach. He can certainly use them. I loved school. It was kind of my favorite place to be. Every time before break time or before we would eat, our teachers would lead us in prayer. Weekly or fortnightly, I can't quite remember, we would go to church like every Wednesday morning with our school, which was a blessing, and we heard the Bible a lot. And when I was in year 2, we did the Nativity, and I was cast as Mary, which I loved. And I can remember just from that, I would go home, and I would go on like my iPad, or the family iPad, and I would watch videos of the like Nativity story in cartoon form. So from there, I wasn't saved because I didn't understand what Jesus had done for me on the cross, but it planted seeds. And I just believed as a kid in God always, like I knew God existed. And I kind of thought, because of what I was taught in school, I kind of thought that God was just objectively real, and that, how we're taught science, that's the same with God, like it just is true. And I believed that Jesus was God. There was a great teacher who was the deputy head of our primary school, and he was so passionate about Jesus. He was always so willing to teach us songs. He loved just teaching us different songs, and he loved talking to us about Jesus, and specifically about the resurrection as well. So I always remember those things. It was just a blessing. But when I went to secondary school, I kind of just put all these things into the back of my mind. Like I said, I always believed in God, and I was always a deep thinker. And one of the things which I just couldn't wrap my head around was consciousness. I don't know if I would have articulated it as that, but I just knew in my mind, I was like, what is this? Like, I don't understand what I am. So I was always thinking about things like that, but I kind of just put Jesus to the back of my mind. And when I got to around year 8, I got into, it sounds crazy because I was so young, but I did get into like a relationship, which was quite toxic. And basically this guy, he was my age, he was in year 8, the same as me. And he would basically threaten me into saying things like, if you don't do this, then I'm gonna kill myself. So that was really hard to deal with as a kid. And, I say that to say, if I had known, obviously I can't say for sure, but if I had known, the biblical foundations and, things God reserves for marriage, maybe I would have known more what was going on, and that wasn't okay. That was quite a hard time. But in secondary school, I kind of just followed the crowd. I wasn't too different to any other kid, really. And then during COVID times, I think that started for me when I was around in year 10. And we went into lockdown whilst I was in year 10 and year 11. And during that time, I was kind of seeking out spiritual things. And like I'd said before, my mum did have some spiritual beliefs. So growing up, I was always kind of aware of the fact that, I know these things aren't true, but I was kind of taught about things, not necessarily my mum teaching me, but conversations I would hear her having with her friends. And then because I had a best friend who my mum was best friends with her mum, if we would be all together, these things would come up about kind of like ghosts and things like that, and even astrology. And I can remember when I first heard about astrology, that's like an umbrella term, but it basically, a lot of you probably know what it means. It's kind of looking at the position of the stars, which people say determine things about your personality. And it goes a lot deeper than that as well. But I can remember the first time my mum and her friend bringing this up to me, and just remember thinking it was really stupid. I was like, surely you don't believe that. But later on in my life, I did get on to believe it very much. But yeah, so during lockdown, I was on my phone a lot because what else was there to do, really? And I came across on TikTok, a lot of people were talking about kind of like a spiritual awakening, which basically means what it says, that you become awake to spiritual truths which you once weren't. So yeah, that kind of took me into a rabbit hole. And it started off just with crystals, which, you know, kind of seem innocent, but they're not really. But basically I got addicted to buying crystals and wearing specific ones to like attract things to yourself. So one which I would wear, for example, is rose quartz, which is said to attract love into your life.
Were you wearing that when you met him, or no?
I wasn't.
Right.
No, I wasn't.
I was going to say, it didn't work, though.
No, it didn't work, actually. If it did, it was of a negative effect.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I was struggling with bad dreams as well, so I was like having a certain type of crystal under my bed to try and...
dream catchers, stuff like that? Or?
I did have a dream catcher, but it was more certain type of crystals. I think it was amethyst. I just put it under my bed, and it's supposed to warn off any bad spirits.
This point where you're kind of exploring spirituality, was the drive? What were the drivers in that? Was it just because you wanted to know, or were you looking for purpose and peace, or what? Was there a mixture of those things? You know, with having a childhood and upbringing and some of the stuff. What was driving you there?
Probably a mixture of a few different things, because like I said, I did believe in God and I was open to spiritual things. Right. And because I hadn't been taught, well, obviously I was taught some things in primary school, but because I didn't have like a foundation that I was brought up with, when these spiritual beliefs were presented to me, and they were very popular at the time, it was like, why wouldn't I believe this, you know? And I guess it is attractive, which is why people believe it as well. And yeah, so I was just seeing it everywhere. And like I said, it started off with crystals. It got into kind of tarot cards and seeking out psychics online to do readings for me, basically. And like I said, astrology goes a lot deeper than just what you're presented with, like about star signs as well. It gets onto, it can even, it professes to prophetically tell you like when you're going to die. So it does get really dark, to be honest, and it tells you how you're going to die and things like that. And we had moved house about 2 years before this, and there was a girl who lived like 2 blocks away from my house, and we ended up becoming like best friends, and she was also into these new age beliefs, so we kind of just fed that. And we both just became immense into it. And when we could, we started going, like I said before, I was seeking out things online because of lockdown. But when we could, we started going to what was named, it's definitely not a church, but it was called a spiritualist church. Have you heard of that? Yeah. So basically you would go, the person up there, kind of like the preacher, would say the Father's Prayer, and he would introduce everyone to say that as well, kind of to protect you. And then he would just call upon people in the audience, and talk to their dead relatives and basically, yeah, like I said, claim to talk to your dead relatives, tell you things about them. And I do believe a lot of this stuff is fake and people just doing it for money and things like that. But I do believe there are dark forces behind some of it as well. So, yeah, that just dragged us in deeper. And my mum ended up coming with us as well. And she was really interested in it. And they, claimed to have kind of conjured up her grandma, who she was really close to growing up. So that got to her emotionally as well. And it made me emotional as well, because thankfully I did get to know my great-grandma. And she passed away when I was around 6, but I do have fond memories of her. So yeah, that, to me, that just kind of affirmed what I believed already. But obviously it wasn't actually dead relatives, it was dark forces. So yeah, I was posting a lot about these spiritual truths that I believed in. And I ended up having somebody respond to me, and he kind of challenged my beliefs, because what I had posted, what he responded to was about multiple gods. And I don't think I understood fully what I was posting about. It was just something I'd seen and I reposted. But he ended up challenging me on my belief in polytheism, so that the belief that there are multiple gods. Because in the New Age, it's not a uniform belief. It's kind of just pick and mix. You choose whatever you want to believe in. So we believe loads of different things which contradict one another. So we would believe that we are our own God, that nature is God, but also we believe in like all these other gods outside of us. So it doesn't really make sense. But yeah, he challenged my belief on that, and he argued from the side of monotheism, so the belief that there is one God. And also one thing as well, which in New Age we say, is that basically there's no ultimate good and evil, it's just kind of my truth. So he challenged me on that and made me think about things like, for example, is murder wrong? Which obviously I would have said it is, but that did contradict my fundamental beliefs that there is no right or wrong, it's just whatever you personally desire. So that definitely planted seeds, and around this time, so I did jump ahead a bit. At this time I was in sixth form, so I think I was in my first year of sixth form. And I wanted to do an EPQ, which is basically, it's an extra half an A level, and you basically write your own dissertation on whatever topic that you want to study. And I did 2, because basically you had to do like a practice one to see if you could do the real one. And my first one, I ended up doing it on Greek mythology. And my second one, I ended up doing it on I can't remember quite my research question, but it was something to the state of, does science allow for the existence of a God? And obviously I didn't focus in on specific religions in that, because that would have been too broad. But amongst my research, I did see a lot of things about Christianity, which did draw me in a bit. And yeah, it just felt like I was seeing a lot of things at the time about Christianity. And basically I was carrying on my conversation with this guy, and I had basically asked, why would Christianity be true, over every other religion? And also that in the New Age, we will say that, like, there's truths in every religion, and kind of that they're all true, but none are true at the same time, which doesn't make sense, because all the religions, that they are fundamentally different. So basically he had told me things about, like, for example, Muhammad, and things about Jesus, and that led to my own research into kind of the historical account of Jesus. And I can remember this was even before I was saved. I ended up having a debate with my New Age friend as to why Christianity was true and not, for example, Islam, because she had specifically questioned me on this as well. But obviously when you look at Jesus versus Muhammad, it's obvious which one is from God. And that's easy to find just looking at the Islamic scriptures themselves and the Christian scriptures. So at this time, we had moved house, like I say, about 2 years before, and there was a church right at the end of my street, and it was an evangelical church. So I ended up just going there, and I was probably there for about 3-4 months before I got saved. And for most of the time that I was there, I didn't really listen. Like, I just remember being in the sermons, and I don't remember anything that the preacher said because I just wasn't really listening. But there was one time where I'd been out, so I'd gone out on a Saturday night for my friend's birthday, and basically I'd gotten like really drunk, and I ended up going to church the next day. But my understanding of Christianity at the time was that basically you have to do works, you have to live a good lifestyle to go to heaven. And I remember I was trying not to drink, I was trying not to vape, things like this. So I could go to heaven, basically, and I specifically remember saying these things to my friends. And I also wanted to get baptized because I believed that was a way, to be a better Christian or to go to heaven. So when I did go to church this following day, after I'd been out and gone drunk, I was just feeling so guilty, and I was feeling like really embarrassed because even though these people didn't know what I had done the night before, I knew, and I felt like I just felt really sick. I felt like maybe you could smell my breath or something, even though I'd brushed my teeth. But, but in a way, God used that, to convict me of my sin and to make me see that I was a sinner. And I can remember that day the preacher was talking about, he specifically preached on how in Corinthians, I can't quite remember the verse, but how bad morals corrupt good character. And he ended up, and I knew that was true because at the time, not to put the blame on other people because I am accountable for my actions, but I was hanging out with people who were influencing me to do certain things, like weed, for example. I was smoking weed, I was doing edibles. I just heard the scripture for like the first time because, like I said, my ears had been closed basically before. And I just knew that was true. So I actually listened to that sermon, and he ended up talking about how we're all bad people. And I can remember at first when I heard that kind of feeling offended, like, I'm not a bad person. Like, I've lied, but I've not murdered anyone. I can specifically remember thinking that. But it did soften my heart, and I did realize that, I had sinned. And basically, I ended up going to a course which the church was doing. You probably heard of it. It's called Christianity Explored. The preacher there took us through this course, and it was on the gospel. I think it was on the Gospel of Mark, and he was going through. Basically, a lot of it was the historical evidence of Jesus and why we should trust the gospel accounts. But I didn't really need all of that, to be honest. Like, for me, I don't know, like, it must have been a mixture of things softened in my heart. But when I heard that Jesus had died for my sins, and he was asking us things like, how would you feel, like, if someone bailed you out of jail for, millions of pounds, you'd be really, really thankful. So that made me think, and I do believe then I got saved. And I remember going home, I can remember calling out to God and just thanking him for what he had done for me in Jesus Christ. So that was around July time, 2023. But yeah, from there it wasn't exactly smooth sailing because I didn't really read my Bible up until I went off to university, so like September of that year, because I kind of thought the Bible was boring. But yeah, thankfully I was saved and sealed by the Holy Spirit. And yeah, I ended up going to university, and I knew that I wanted to make some Christian friends. So I ended up reaching out to the Christian Union, and yeah, I kind of got involved there. And then around this time is when I met Oliver as well. So we had met previously very briefly at a sports event with the Christian Union, but we had met where we actually had a conversation was at a church. It was a charismatic church, actually, because I was very unknowledgeable at the time about Christianity and denominations, and I didn't even know that these different denominations existed, really. So I was just kind of going to every church because our Christian Union did like church searches for people to find their home church, and Oliver was there as well because at this time he had he was a bit more knowledgeable than me because he'd been saved. How long had you been saved, Oliver?
About 9 months. I was just visiting that church.
Yeah, I'm getting onto that. He was just visiting that church. He had gotten into theology. I'm getting onto that. So yeah, he was a bit more knowledgeable than me, and he was getting into theology. And he was a big fan of John MacArthur at the time, and he knew obviously what he taught about the charismatic church. So he wanted to see it out for himself, and he didn't agree with it, but he was just curious, is this really happening, basically? So that's where we had a conversation. I can remember after the church kind of did like a quiz for students, and we were on the same team, but we weren't really involved in the quiz. We were just talking about Christianity and just theological questions, because I was really interested. So I was asking him a lot of questions. And then the following week, he was there again. I was there again, because it was like a student, Pete and I. So we were both there. And we had a conversation for like 4 hours. He was sharing his testimony with me. I think I shared some of mine as well. And basically from there, we got each other's numbers so we could carry on our conversation, because the night ended, so we hadn't finished it yet. And during this time as well, I was praying for like a good friend to come into my life, because even though I was at the Christian Union and I had made some great friends, but not someone I felt like I could call my best friend. And yeah, it was probably October, November time when I met Grace. And from there is when I feel like there was a turning point where I was like, I can remember for the first time when I did finally take the time to read the Bible, just being amazed and like, I never want to put this book down. And it was just after that I had met Grace, and she was really passionate about the Bible and the Bible's teachings. And yeah, she thankfully led me to some good teachers, like Arnold Fruchtenbaum, Andy Woods later on. But yeah, we hadn't seen each other too many times because she lived in Derby at the time. I lived in Nottingham. So at this time, like Oliver mentioned when he shared his testimony, he had basically evangelized me into Calvinism. And yeah, I wasn't in it for super long, probably about six months. I'm pretty sure he evangelized me into it pretty soon after we met. And then I can remember basically the story of how I came out of it. I can remember I was posting on TikTok about a verse in Matthew 7, I think it's 13 to 14, where it talks about, you probably know it better than me, but broad and wide is the gate which leadeth to destruction, but straight and narrow is the way which leadeth unto life. But I wasn't reading the KJV at the time, and I think I was reading the ESV or something. But in whatever translation I posted it in, it was saying that narrow and difficult is the way which leadeth unto life. And like I said, I was saved. I was sealed by the Holy Spirit, and I was professing to believe in faith alone. But I had got mixed up, and I basically posted.
No.
Oh no, I think it died.
Oh, do you batteries, please? You batteries. There's batteries in the back there. 1, 2, 3, go. There they come. No. Two, in the charger, 2 AA batteries.
Shall I carry on? Or?
No, we'll wait for the batteries. Wait for the batteries. I'll do a little bit now.
Okay.
All right, just hang in there. So, as we're unpacking Rose's story here, and we're kind of getting to the end of it now, but you've seen that she was on a spiritual journey, and I think for a lot of people today, especially young people today, they are on a spiritual journey because the world has woke up to the hopelessness, that the atheism of Richard Dawkins and others, that there's no purpose, there's no meaning, and actually really understand that in this world that just doesn't hold at all. And so people are searching for purpose and meaning. And so, the enemy's aware of this. We are beings that are created to worship, to connect to something otherworldly, if you like. And so the search happens, and Rose speaking about this, and what happens is, I absolutely believe this, that whenever God reveals some of his light, the light was being revealed to Rose at that primary school with that headmaster, and just those seeds of not getting into the depth of the theology, but the seeds of the gospel being sown, and a mind that is pricked to that illumination. Here's what always happens. When the light is shown, the darkness gets to work. And the darkness gets to work by presenting itself as light. Satan is the master deceiver. And so many people that are on this spiritual journey get pulled into spiritualism and start to see things of the spiritual world and are attracted to them. That's not what God is showing them. It's what the enemy is showing them, presenting himself as an angel of light. And if you're involved in that stuff, mediums or getting readings done or looking at your stars, I want you to understand that at the top of that pyramid is a satanic system, and the devil sits at the top of that as the great deceiver. And you may say to me, well, I've been into these before, and they've said stuff that nobody could know. But if you've been in one of those things where you've truly seen a manifestation of darkness, you're dealing with the real deal. You're dealing with demonic forces. The majority of those people are charlatans, they're frauds, they're circus trick ponies. But the ones that are real are dealing with real demonic forces. And those demonic forces want to pull you into the eternal fire of hell. Make no mistake about it. God's light is the only light that saves. It's the only light that saves. And so, on your journey there, you've been presented with light. The darkness has done its best. You've gone into the light and you've grown into the light. And so now we'll get back to your story there, where you're not, now you're in the light, but you're trying to work out exactly where your place is in that light. So you can kind of wrap it up.
Yeah. I'll just say something quickly as well to that point. Because I did believe that when I was in the New Age, these teachings were of kind of love and light. That's something we would say. But there was darkness as well. There was a lot of times when I would try to go to sleep, and when I closed my eyes, it didn't feel like this was in my mind. It felt like it was right in front of me. I would just see darkness. I won't go into detail, but really dark things and like death. And there were so many times where I just slept with the light on because I was so scared. But I'll digress. But that was because I was involved with dark forces because of what I was practicing. But yeah, moving on. Like I said, I'd posted this thing on TikTok basically saying to the extent that people think it's easy to get into heaven, but it's actually hard. And I ended up having like a debate in the comment section with this man called David. We're actually good friends with him now. And we ended up meeting him for the first time at our wedding. But basically, he was challenging my beliefs. I was going in with that. I was going to convince him. But we spoke for like for about 3 days. He was showing me from the scriptures how, salvation is a one-time thing, and all it takes is literally faith alone. Like, I was espousing to faith alone, but I was believing in faith and works. And I was preaching works. So, he showed me that. And basically through my own study as well, I came to the conclusion that what I was believing in was wrong, for multiple different reasons. But I won't go into all of those details. But at this time, me and Oliver were engaged, so we got engaged in about April time of 2024. And he was still believing in these beliefs. And I, obviously, I didn't want him to believe in these things, but I didn't want to pressure him or anything. But I knew that if he stayed in these beliefs, I couldn't marry him. So behind the scenes, I was praying for him a lot. And, thankfully, it only took about a month, but he did come to the right conclusions, praise God. Since being a Christian, it's been amazing, but it wasn't how would I word it? It's like it wasn't always, kind of straight and easy.
Yeah.
So in just going back a bit in January 2024, so I'd been saved like 6 months or something at this point. My grandpa, he got diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, out of the blue. He had probably been struggling with it for a long time, but to us, and to himself, he seemed completely healthy. So it was a big shock. The way he got diagnosed is because he kept struggling with a cough, and originally they thought it was asthma, but turns out it wasn't lung cancer, but it spread to his lungs. So at the time, I was worried for my grandpa's salvation because I knew that I didn't know 100%, but I was pretty sure, he hadn't believed in the gospel. He did profess to be a Christian when he was young, but during the time I knew him, maybe he would say it for my grandma's sake, but I don't think he actually believed. I was worried about his salvation. I ended up writing him a letter because people were always around him, and I knew what some of the people thought of my beliefs, so I wanted to be able to tell him straight the gospel. So I ended up writing him a letter and leaving it for him on his desk, and he didn't take the gospel part super well. I did write some personal things in there which he responded well to, but he said it was a bit too religious for him. And during this time as well, I started struggling with extreme health anxiety, and I think that came from the night that I found out my grandpa had cancer. I think I ended up having like a panic attack, and then I was scared that it was like a heart attack. And basically that just happened so many times. And because I was so worked up during these times where I was having panic attacks, the effects were kind of lasting. So throughout the next week or so, I would have kind of like heart palpitations, but just out of anxiousness, not because anything was physically wrong. So it was just an ongoing cycle. I mean, to be honest, it was only about 7 months ago where I haven't had one of these episodes. Thankfully, they did become less as I grew, had spiritual growth in Christ, but they weren't completely eradicated. That it wasn't the easiest of times, but I'm so grateful for who God put in my life. And a book that I loved to read was Ephesians. I can remember the first time when I read that about putting on the armor of God. I was just amazed, and I knew that what I was going through wasn't merely, it was also spiritual attacks as well. Me and Oliver, we ended up getting married in August 2025. Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, because we're only in 2026 now. God's still writing our stories, but yeah.
All right, Rose, give a round of applause. Yeah. Thank you for sharing your story. It takes courage to get up and share, and even to think back and reflect, and just talking about our grandfather clearly and the impact that he had on our life. But Rose's story could be very different. If she hadn't responded to the Lord Jesus Christ and the light that he was shown. No doubt she'd get pulled further and further into darkness. And I can tell you now, as one who is been on the front edge of what the darkness is that it presents itself as light until you get there. And when you get there, you see it as a dark void that is full of wickedness and evil. The enemy wants you destroyed.
and he wants to keep people from the light. That's his job. And he's doing a good job of it. I'm not going to take it away from him, because he is. You go into the world today, you maybe go to supermarkets or, malls or whatever, shopping centres. Don't be surprised if you'll find a shop with what are they selling in the front? Crystals and Wicca books and Ouija boards and the Satanic Bible and all that sort of stuff. What is it? It's to capture people and to bring them into the worship of Satan. All of it. And so the Bible's very clear. We're not to worship the sun, the moon, and the stars. We're to worship the one true God who created all of those things. And so I'm thankful for Rose's story. I'm thankful that she came to the Lord. She's met Oliver, sorted him out theologically, and hopefully fix him. And, glad that they've been brought to our church and are a very active part in it. And Oliver is studying at the Bible College, so we keep them in prayer for whatever ministry they're going to go on to, and what the Lord will bless them in and be able to use them. And hopefully those experiences will be able to tell others about the dangers of dabbling in those things.